feel as though the rug has been pulled out from under your feet? Has COVID so disrupted your world that you feel as though physically, emotionally, financially, your world has been turned upside down? Many of you listening to this would have felt that I've just got everything back on track after the 2008 crash, and now we have COVID. How do we reimagine a future? How do we reimagine a future when it feels as though everything we've known has just been pulled away from under us? I'm going to share my story with you today, and it's a story about reimagining. It's a story about having the rug pulled out from under my feet several times. And I hope that in this story, you are able to find some inspiration and perhaps an idea or two to help you take the next step in your own future. When I was 16 years old, in 1989, I woke up one Friday morning feeling terrible. I felt like I had flu. I went to school, I stayed in bed all weekend. By Monday morning, I wasn't feeling any better. What was wrong with me? We went to the doctor, and the doctor thought it was flu. But a month down the road, I still had the same symptoms. My body ached. I was running a fever. My head hurt all the time, and I was nauseous. And it just kept going on and on. We went to so many different doctors. They thought I had yuppie flu, and then another doctor suggested that I had an over-anxious mother, and then somebody else suggested that I myself was suffering from depression, and that was the problem. I got over the depression that I was struggling with, but the symptoms persisted. After 3 years of being flat on my back in bed, I landed up in hospital, and my organs were beginning to fail. Most importantly, my heart was starting to beat irregularly, and the doctors thought I had about 6 months left to live. My parents were going to have none of it. They thought there was definitely something wrong with me, and we needed to find a cure. And my father got in touch with a doctor who was treating my old riding school teacher. And this doctor believed that people like myself had a form of tick-bite fever, what we now know to be Lyme's disease, but in those days, nobody quite knew what it was. My bloods had to be sent to Belgium. We were living in South Africa. And so this was a big expense. And when the bloods went to Belgium, they came back showing that I did have this form of tick-bite fever. Living in South Africa, we knew about tick-bite fever, but we only tested for certain types of it. And so I had gone undiagnosed for so many years. I then went on a course of treatment for 18 months of high doses of antibiotics. I would be on an antibiotic for a week, off for 2 weeks, and then back on the antibiotic. Finally, I was able to walk again, and I finished my schooling, and I felt that now life could start. I went to university, and throughout my undergraduate degree and postgraduate degrees, I would have periods of being well, and then I would be sick for a year or 3 months or 6 months, but I made it through. And I got my master's degree, and I got accepted to do a PhD in the UK with a British Commonwealth scholarship, and the world was looking fantastic. I went off and I started my studies. I came back to South Africa to do my fieldwork, and once again I felt ill. This time the symptoms were a little bit different. I wasn't running a fever, but I had the most terrible aches, not just in my muscles, but also in my joints. 18 months later, I landed up with a doctor who diagnosed me as having a form of autoimmune disease and fibromyalgia. She put me onto the right medication, and I was good to go again. I picked myself up again, and I went back to the UK, and I worked on my PhD. I came back to South Africa in 2006, and I had completed my PhD, and I really felt life was going to start. I had learned amazing things during the time that I had been ill. when I was so young and I was sick for 4 years, I could read, I could listen to the radio, and I could do cross-stitch, but I couldn't do much more than that. In this time, I really learnt the importance of listening. I also learnt the importance of silence, and I learnt the importance of broadening one's horizons, exploring the world through books. This was an amazing time for me and for my friends. During this time, my friends realized that I was always at home. And so people would come and visit me, and almost every day somebody came to see me. And they didn't come to see me because they were sorry for me, but rather because I was always there and available. And I realized that one of the most important things in life, friendships, are something we don't get awards for. We don't get a PhD in friendship. And yet, it's one of the most important things in the world. My friends often tell me that they miss that time in my life because I was always available. I was always there for them. As I was going through my degrees and struggling with being well and then being ill and then being well again, I learned how to have a certain determination. But what I really learned was the importance of doing what you love. If you do something that you love doing, then you have that inner energy to keep going. I was studying world religions and found it completely fascinating. One of the things that I learned in my studies and in all my reading was that the great epics of this world, the great literature, even the very oldest story, the story of Gilgamesh, a story written in Mesopotamia about 4,500 years ago, is a story about somebody overcoming. This hero goes on an extraordinary quest and he vanquishes all this evil and he overcomes, and then his life is wonderful. Much of our self-help literature is very helpful, but it tells us that if we do certain things, then our life will be much easier. My struggle was that I would do all these things, and still I often got ill. Still, things were disappointing. But when I got back to South Africa, having completed my PhD, I got married, I became an Anglican priest, I published my first book, I had a wonderful job teaching as a lecturer, and I was really enjoying my life. Then, in 2012, I miscarried at 13 weeks. For me, this was really a difficult experience. I was so looking forward to this little baby, and I was convinced it was a little girl. I miscarried because once again, I was ill. I had to stop working. I went on to chemotherapy and then biologic drugs because the autoimmune disease that I had now flared up and become full-blown. During this time, I really experienced loss in a profound way. It felt as though the rug was pulled out from under me yet again. I lost my job, I lost the baby that I wanted, but I also had a sense of loss about the future. Did my future look like a series of getting back onto my feet and then losing it all again? Getting back onto my feet and losing it all again. And really, why did I want to get up in the morning? What was the point of all of this? In my loss, I started to think about, why am I here? What is my purpose? My purpose is not to win some great award. My purpose is not to be the best at something. Surely my purpose must be something deeper than that. And I started to think about the world and how we judge things. What we love to do is take a ruler. We take one measure and we use it to measure everything. So if we took this ruler and we used it to measure the beautiful candles all around me, we would know how high the candles are, we would know how wide the candles are, we would know the height of the flame, but we really wouldn't know very much more. And we do that with our lives. We measure ourselves according to a bank account. In the academic world, we do it according to the amount of publications that you have made. In the business world, we often do it according to the amount of sales you've made. What we love to do is take one measure and say, that's who you are. And that's so unfair and untrue. The second fallacy that we tell ourselves is what we love to tell young children when they start school, that everybody is starting at the same point, and that we measure ourselves equally according to some kind of criteria. That's not true. My achievements are very different to your achievements. Not because the achievements are different, but because I've had to achieve these things from a different perspective to you, from a different beginning point or vantage point. I have achieved the things I've done while dealing with a chronic illness. You have achieved the things you've achieved while dealing with your struggles, with your challenges. And we seem to pretend that this doesn't exist. And so we undermine our achievements so often. Having got over this last illness, I then went on and got a job at the University of Johannesburg. I became head of department and then vice dean, and I'm currently the executive director of the libraries, a job I love. But it comes back to my question, what is my purpose? Why do I get up in the morning? My purpose is to make other people flourish. My purpose is to create an environment where it doesn't matter what your challenges are. It doesn't matter what your limitations are. It is an environment in which you can use what you do have and allow yourself to flourish in that space. For me, leadership is all about creating a team that we can work together, that we can flourish together. My illness has taught me the importance of a team because I don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. All I can do is live in my moment today. Lao Tzu, one of the famous sages of China, says that when we live in the past, we live with depression. When we live in the future, we live with anxiety. When we live in the present, we live with peace. And that's been one of the big lessons that I've had to learn. And so as you go through COVID-19 and your world is falling apart and you have to reimagine and reshape a new future for yourself, try to think of what is it that is your purpose, not against the ruler of a bank account or achievements or sales, but against your authentic self. Look at what you have been able to achieve, given the constraints of your own life. And then allow yourself to live in the present. It's the only place where we can find peace. And for me, the other really important thing is allow yourself to live in the present with friends and family, in connection with one another. I have the privilege of living in South Africa, and our African philosophy is, I am because you are. And perhaps that's one of the most important things I've learned in my journey. It's not about achievements. It's about my relating to other people, my sharing with other people, my ability to create a space for others to flourish so that I can flourish with you. Together, we will get through COVID. we will find new ways of being. And I hope that this story inspires you, that the new future that you reimagine for yourself is one in which you are authentic. COVID is offering us new beginnings. Let's embrace them. Let's see where they'll take us. And let's live in the present, at peace